I still remember still
I
remember
love how she announces it.
the first time driving over the Golden Gate Bridge, and all of the all the fog is like rolling over the hills there,
Mhm.
and just thinking that was so trippy, very crazy looking.
It's beautiful. It's definitely a thing that I look forward to all the time. It's so nice. And our microclimates, just in general. It's always fun here. If you don't like the weather where you are, just drive 10 minutes. You will find something. So, hello, everybody. Again, we are happy to have you here. My name is Jen. I'm from Looking Glass Photo. We are super lucky to have Tamron with us again today. Ben, our rep, our national sales rep, and of course, Jillian, who's going to be our presenter today, talking about composition, cropaholic. I totally get it. I too am a cropaholic. You can admit it. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. As always, put your questions in the chat. Jillian's going to be addressing those as they pop up. Feel free to jump in with that at any point in time as your questions appear. And we are recording again today. So if you can't stay with us the entire time, that's okay. Everybody who RSVP'd will be getting the recording of this. So you can watch the rest of it later, but we love having you here. So don't leave if you don't have to. Ben, you got any info for us today?
I do have some info for you. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and drop that. I'm not. I have to recopy and paste here. So basically, the info that I am tasked with sharing with everybody there, it's in the chat room, is just the rebates, of which we have quite a few opportunities, promotions, things going on right now, all of which you can take advantage of at Looking Glass Camera. So for those of you that are in California, absolutely check out Looking Glass. You can visit them online, you can call the store, you can go in if you're very local. Of the promos we have going on, kind of the two big ones here, we got the Father's Day. Those are going to extend for the next week. Father's Day.
I don't know where he put them. I'll have to send him an email.
Well, please mute yourself.
What's that? Yeah, let's have real quick, just a quick reminder, everybody, if you could mute both audio and video, that'll help Jillian while she's while she's doing her presentation. But so yeah, Father's Day promos. We also have you've seen the bonus bucks there. That is like a trade up, trade and trade up program, of which there are only so many dealers, authorized dealers, that are actually taking advantage of that, and Looking Glass is one of those. So if you are in the market for a new glass for your Sony mirrorless camera, and you've got some gear you want to trade up, you can bring that into Looking Glass, and Jen and her staff will help you guys out, give you a nice little deal on that. So again, any questions on those, please reach out to Looking Glass. They are an incredible staff. They're very well informed, not just on Tamron, but on everything. And that's my piece.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, please do take advantage of these programs. And like with everything right now, I just want to remind everybody, getting products into the store is more difficult. It has been since the beginning of the pandemic. So if we don't have it in stock, don't let that stop you. Go ahead and place the order with us. We will get it for you, and we will work with our wonderful team over at Tamron or whoever, and use everything that we can to get you stuff as quickly as possible. I very much live on my integrity. How's that? I don't oversell to any vendors. We don't ask for more than we need. So when I ask, I'm doing it specifically, and I'm trying to do everything I can to get your stuff as quickly as possible. So that's just a reminder. Our lists are short, and I work very hard on your behalf to make sure you get the products you need in as timely a manner as we can possibly make happen. With that, I'm going to go ahead and mute and turn my video off, and I'm going to let Jillian get to teaching, because this is one of my favorite subjects. Thanks so much for being here, Jillian.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Ben. Hello and welcome. Anyone who has been to one of my classes before, welcome back. If I have any new faces in the audience today, welcome, welcome. I also wanted to lift up just the Tamron website. if anyone is new to the Tamron brand, this is where you can find all of the information you would ever need to know about Tamron lenses, tamron-usa.com down there on the bottom. Lots of how-to videos, lots of product specs and MDF charts and sample images. If there's any students in the audience, I do quite a bit of work with the Academy of Art there right next door to this door. And there's a specific school program that I lead, that I head up, that I'm very passionate about. So check out the website if you're not familiar. If you are familiar, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like they said, my name is Jillian Bell. I go by Bell Tamron USA, mostly on Facebook and Instagram, but Twitter I'm on occasion. I'm a national technical representative. So Ben, he's your local sales rep there in the Pacific Northwest, in the Northern California region. He makes sure that stores like Looking Glass are well prepared, they're well stocked. If applicable, they are well trained to keep your local representatives available and knowledgeable on what you need. It just helps them answer your questions on a day-to-day basis. I come in as a photographer, as an educator, as an artist to help you all enhance your own photography. This topic is something that is also near and dear to my heart. It's cropping and composition is part of my veins. I live and breathe it every day. And it's only been until recently, maybe March or May, that I've thought about putting all of these ideas into a class. And it's been perceived very well. So you guys are in for a treat today. Again, use the chat. We have 3 topics that I'm going to cover. The principles of design, why one photograph might look better than another, the different types of composition, because there are more than one. And then lastly, I'm going to discuss and put these ideas into practice and show you how to diagram your own photographs. At the end of each of these sections, I will stop for question and answer. So again, please use that chat. Please be active. I've got it right up here in front of me. Why is composition important? Let's start with that. If you've ever been told you have a good eye for photography, or for some reason you're looking at 2 or 3 photos and one just stands out as being more aesthetically pleasing, you like it better, but you're not sure why. All of these ideas break down to the principles of design. Specifically, the Gestalt principles of design. This means unified whole. It's a study that a bunch of scientists did over in Germany back in the 1920s. And they studied the process of which our eyes and our minds perceive visual information. When we, the viewer, perceive visual objects, we tend to group similar objects together. We recognize patterns, and we like to simplify complex scenes. The overall goal here in using the principles in design and photography is to create an image that is aesthetically pleasing and easy for the viewer to understand. Now, I'm not going to say that everyone has to view photographs in the same way. One of the things that I really love about my work and my workshops, and the fact that I get to go around with Tamron nationwide and lead all of these different photographic experiences, is that we all have a different vision. We all tell a different story from a different perspective. But if we really simplify, again, why does one photograph look better than another? There definitely are some trends that pop up. And so these are the ideas that we're gonna discuss today. In general, when we view visual movement in subjects, so when we're kind of diagramming a scene and looking at a photograph for the first time, the viewer is naturally drawn to the closest element, so the thing that's closest to you perspectually, the brightest element, and then the sharpest element in the frame, in that order. Again, generally, when we look at visual movement in lines, horizontal lines are stability and order. Vertical lines signifies height and strength. We also use these 2 types of lines to have a little bit of a waypoint or a rest point for the viewer when you're exploring a scene. So if we have a horizontal image moving from left to the right, any vertical line you see is going to be a quick hurdle, a quick rest, and then we can move on to the rest of the scene. Diagonal lines and curved lines, these are the movement lines. These are the leading lines in our frame. Diagonal lines have a little bit of tension. Curved lines are a little bit softer. They show more resolution in your image. And then zigzaggy lines, lots and lots of texture and lots of lines, really just means chaos. And I will discuss how to fix that if it is distracting. Thank you, Tony. Got a little spelling mistake there for me. There are many different principles of design. If you do just a quick internet search, there will be more than these, but I like this infographic. I'm going to focus on these 7 today. Closure, common fate, continuation, similarity, figure ground, proximity, and then lastly, symmetry. At the end, I'll take again a quick pause for questions. So if you have any while I'm in this section, please use that chat. When we talk about closure, this is when an object isn't completely complete. Our eyes, our minds, we're smart enough to fill in the gap. Very common example of this is, if you've ever seen a portraiture that is cropped off in the head to focus in on the expression, or maybe they crop into the arm a little bit. We are smart enough to know that they still have a top of a head. We are smart enough to know that that arm continues and the elbow is there, even though it might not be pictured in the frame. When we talk about storytelling, we like to figure out what's going on in the frame. I always tell myself stories about what's in the photograph. They might not be 100% correct, but we can tell in this photograph, this is at a Rangers game a couple of years ago down in Arlington, Texas. And this guy messed up. There was an error on the field. Again, don't really remember what it is, but you can tell just by looking at this picture what's going on. Mazara's not very happy about that. And then DeShields is there for like a mediator, trying to figure out what's going on. We can fill in these details using closure. Here's another one. We see closure very often when we deal with text, we deal with letters, numbers, facial recognitions. If you've ever seen faces in inanimate objects, that's exactly what we're talking about here. This is a huge statue outside of downtown Columbus, Ohio. It doesn't literally say art, but we can tell that that is what it says, and that's what it's meant to say, again, because we are smart enough to fill in the gaps. And as I'm going through these, it's also important to note that we can see more than one element in our photo. We're not just going to have one picture that only shows this element. They tend to work together in different ways. I'm trying to pull out the best examples based on each one for you all, for your understanding. Second one's common fate. Here, everyone and everything, they just seem to fit in the same scene. We see common fate very often in event photography, so weddings, corporate events, holiday photography, things like that. Saw all my neighbors out in the backyard last 4th of July. All these people are a part of the same parade. They're a part of the same holiday. It all just makes sense. Dance. It's a good friend of mine, her production last winter. Everybody in the audience is enjoying the scene. All the dancers are up on stage. Everything in this frame looks like it makes sense. There isn't anything out of place or maybe where it's not supposed to be. Thirdly, continuance. This is leading lines. So visually, the eye, the mind is compelled to move from one element to another. And when I say a photographic element, when I look at photos, I really break them down either into subject matter or into shapes, maybe into colors. And we just refer to them as elements. So in this scene, got 2 chimpanzees enjoying some lunch, some sweet potatoes in the afternoon. Which one is the main subject? What do you guys think? Continuance here, we've got this beautiful sun shade line that goes up and over framing, circling around secondary chimpanzee, and his arm is conveniently outstretched in such a way that leads us back to the first one. Here, what are the leading lines here? In this case, they're a little more literal. You see the road? The road is a recognizable subject, so we naturally gravitate towards that. And this line visually leads us up over this ridge. Red is a very dynamic color. It tends to push forward visually in our photographs. So it's natural for our eyes to follow this ridge up. And then these 2 lines converge. And now we follow this line up, leading us back into the subject or back into the background. Next one is similarity. This is just a literal repetition of shapes, a color, or an object. This is a really great way to emphasize a main subject or make one element more important by repeating it. The repetition of a subject is typically smaller, it's less sharp. Maybe it's not 100% whole, like if you're dealing with 3 or 4 flowers in a field. When we have similar objects together, we like odd numbers. Again, I don't know why, this is just a trend that comes up, so 3s, 5s, anything more than that, like 7s or 9s, we want to subgroup them into smaller sections. Again, simplifying it into groups of 3, groups of 5. So this is my main subject. I love photographing lanterns. I do this all the time. The reflection here, I'm assuming that this is the same one just because it's in line with it. It's smaller. I don't remember if it was or not, but I think, there's just some really good visual space in between the two. Next one. Cows on the side of the road having lunch. Grew up on a farm, always gravitate to farm animals as well. I don't know, it's just nostalgic to me. How do you group these images together? We've got 7 animals, but like I said, anything 7 or above, we tend to kind of, again, group these things together. So we've got 2 that have the same white face. So I'm going to group those together visually. 2 black Angus, I'm going to group together visually because they're the same. The red Angus kind of stands out on its own. It's in the center, it's symmetrical, it's a different color. And then this guy, he's kind of on his own. He kind of blends in a little bit, specifically because he's the same texture and the same color as the hay that they're grazing on. So maybe think about that. Not that this was posed in any way, but visually, just keep that in mind. What's the repeating element in this scene? What do you see? Does anyone see the sheep? Yep. Jen, you're right. So this landscape is pretty traditional. It's pretty static. There's not a lot of visual movement going on, but we can use the repetition of the sheep. And the shepherd decided to spray paint them humanely with bright pink mohawks so he could tell which ones were his. Leads you back into the background, into the sunset. We are naturally gravitating towards the sunset because it is a very bright element in this scene. But the sheep, this repeating element, kind of helps bring us back forward into the foreground. Couple more. Next, we have proximity. And proximity is similar to repetition or similarity, but in this case, the elements are just close together, so therefore we see them in a group. Take a look at this photo. How do you group the swings together? Again, there's really no right or wrong answer, but you'll generally group them in 1 or 2 ways. These 3 will be grouped as one, and this one will be on its own, specifically because I am dividing them with that hard post there in the middle. You can also do it by color. That's 100% right. The yellow ones are together. They're greenish black ones are the same. One more. Same sort of question. The yellow cars get grouped together, but I want the cab to be my main subject. This was at a model train museum here in St. Paul. And I go there often because I really love finding these little vignettes, almost like a scavenger hunt. When I'm walking around, I've got an afternoon free. The problem is this convertible is the same color. Whoops. And so they're tending to group together, and it's kind of pulling focus away from the cab. So if this was a different color, then I could do that in Photoshop after, but for demonstration purposes, I kind of like the example. That's connecting these 2 elements together. Next one is figure ground. This one's kind of my favorite. And if you've ever gone on a photo shoot with me, you'll see me kind of shift back and forth, maybe rock up and down a little bit. And what I'm doing is connecting my background and my foreground, giving each element their space. I don't want to overlap them, because anytime you overlap elements, they tend to connect and form as one. And so once I identify my subject, I can move slightly in a handheld nature to line up my background in relationship to my subject. It's all about your perspective as the photographer. In this case, this was down east of Phoenix a couple winters ago. Beautiful sunset, beautiful silhouetted cowboy. We got some dust kicking up here from a dust blower. like a leaf blower that is going just off of frame. I could have connected the sun itself, this burst, with the silhouette, but that would kind of, it would decrease the balance left to right, the visual movement left to right. It would connect these two elements into one scene. So I like to separate them a little bit. Showing an example of the opposite. This is it's a bike rack that's in one of the parks here in Minneapolis. They are literally 3 feet apart. But because I'm using telephoto lens properties, this is at a 400 millimeter lens, and I'm standing further back, I can compress this scene. And now that they're stacking on top of each other, it kind of looks like one statue instead of 3 separate pieces. I like this one too. Here's another question for you all. Which one do you like better? The one on the left or the one on the right? Feel free to answer. There is no right or wrong answer, but there is one that it looks better. In this case, there is a right answer. And again, all I did was slightly shift my perspective left to right to line up my background with my subject matter. Oh, wow. Lots of right side answers. So it is the one on the left, and I'll explain why. Similar subject matter. The issue that I have with the photograph on the right is this horizontal or this vertical line that's cutting my photograph in half. That's the main deal. Vertical lines, this is a very strong visual element, so it's drawing my eye to it away from my subject matter, which is the lanterns. The second thing is this lantern on the left on the right-hand photograph is overlapping that window in such a way that it's connecting them visually. And so again, the foreground is blending into the background and we're losing it as a main subject. And so repositioning the lantern in such a way that we're breaking up now that strong visual element kind of now leads your eye to this piece. And then visually we kind of go over and explore the other one. And even though it's still overlapping the window, it's not in such a way that is distracting. Thank you for participating. I love it. Last one. And then again, we're going to break for a question. So if you have any specific interests of these principles of design, throw them in the chat. We'll take a quick moment and answer those next. Now, the last principle of design is symmetry. And this is that idea of it's an overall balance or imbalance visually. Play around with negative space. Negative space in a photograph is it's an area that's devoid of texture or detail. It's just kind of like a vast sort of scene. This picture's got a lot of negative space. All of this sky up here, there's not a whole lot going on. So we can use negative space. We can use this idea of visual balance. A strong element on the left, a strong element on the right, top, bottom, things like that. Again, just to make the photograph look whole. We're using all these different, we're lining up the elements in such a way in our frame that it fills the scene with interesting information. Here, this is asymmetry. The art museum in downtown Milwaukee has these beautiful arches in it. Kind of an abstract. Shooting through it, you just get this really great tunnel or hole, well, whatever you want to call it, to fall into visually. And if I didn't have this bright blue section of negative space on the left, you wouldn't have that thing to like pull you back out of it. You just kind of keep going down and down and down. So I'm using asymmetry here to help balance out that downward motion with an anchor, a good anchor in the foreground. Any of you did not know, Ben hails from the Wisconsin area, kind of a small town outside of Milwaukee. So I like throwing these ones in there for him. Got one of your pictures in this presentation, actually, Ben. You'll see it later. This is true symmetry. Again, going back to that zoo, trying to elevate our zoo photographs from snapshots into a photo into something a little more fine art. It's all about realizing what you like about a subject matter. In this case, we've got this old billy goat. Love the horns, love the damage, love all the life and wisdom that he has in his beard and his horns. And so we zoom in cut out all the distractions. You can tell this is a captured animal because of the ear tag, but it's not about that. It's about the symmetry in the horns, in the face, and the subtle details between the left and right sides. Last one. I use symmetry a lot when I have a lot of visual movement in my subject matter. So this is a photo from my darkness class where I talk about painting with light. And visually, there's just a lot of motion with the flashlight as it's moving in and out of the frame that I need a nice symmetrical foundation for this to lay into. We talk about this, we bring this up, we learn these ideas because we want to learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. Just like composition, just like principles of design. You know, if you understand these ideas and how to use them properly, or maybe how not to use them for a specific look, it just helps, cuts down on stress, makes your work a little bit more consistent. All right, how are we doing? Any questions? Does that all make sense to everyone?
It must, because no questions so far. I think
Yeah, I haven't seen any.
Just holding them until the end, or they're just so engaged in your presentation, Jillian, that they haven't even had time to stop by the old chat room.
Cool. We'll keep going then. Who knows that there is more than one type of composition? That's another great question. There are 4. And this is definitely beyond a basics class because we will talk about the rule of thirds for anybody who hasn't heard of that before. But the 3 others are kind of derived from this idea. We've got the golden triangle, the golden ratio, and then center weighted, which is also known as the rule of quads, I'd like to talk about as well. This is where cropping comes in. So my technique, and I will be honest, I crop every photo that I take before it goes into its final output. So we use composition, and I use cropping and composition to help highlight my subject, to help cut down on distractions, and really enhance my photo for its end purpose. You know, and Instagram is a square format. That's a different crop than a Facebook cover page, you know, long and skinny. 16:9 on a TV, that's a different proportion than like an 8:10 photograph, or a 16:20, you know. If you know what the purpose of the photo is, you can use these types of composition to crop it in such a way so we can best highlight our subject and really make a photograph that is aesthetically pleasing, keeping the elements of design in play. I always edit first, great question tomorrow, and then I crop afterwards. Because I never really know where it's going to end up until it ends up there. So here, golden rule of thirds. I bring this one up just if anyone's never heard of it before. This is the most common. Basically, we take our photograph and we divide it into this tic-tac-toe quadrant. Anywhere where these lines intersect, you can place your subject, and it's going to make it automatically aesthetically pleasing. So we like to say, get your subject out of the center, put it on one of these lines, and then use the other 3 to either repeat it, get some leading lines in there, balance it out, whatever. Here, kind of a non-traditional portrait using this area on the right as a sharp interest versus the subject on the left. Oh, great, lots of great cropping questions. I will address those at the end. Big thing with the rule of thirds is think about your landscapes. I see it time and time again, a horizon line that's right smack dab in the middle. And again, you know the rules so you can break them. If the sky and the land are equally important, then you put your horizon line right in the middle. Balance it out, make it super symmetrical. But if not, you have to make that decision. Is the land more important? Then we push our horizon line up. This is at White Sands National Park down in the Southwest. California beach photo. Here the sky is more important, using that negative space, using that sunburst as an interest point, pushing that horizon line down to the lower third line. The closer that horizon line gets to the edge of your frame, the more tension it's going to have. So keep that in mind. I like to do that with like big storm clouds rolling in or a really epic sunset. I'll push that horizon line all the way down to the bottom. Golden triangle. Here it's similar to the rule of thirds, but it pays more attention to the diagonals. And this is where it comes into, what part of the world are you coming from? How do you perceive information? Do you read from the left to the right or the right to the left, top to the bottom, things like that? Here in the West, we read from the left to the right. So if we have an ascending diagonal line from the left moving to the right, it's going to be a very positive photograph. It's going to be uplifting. Conversely, if we have a descending diagonal from the left to the right, overall, it's going to have more of a negative feeling. It's going to maybe seem less positive. So keep that in mind. Going back to the art museum, just a gorgeous building architecturally, using these strong diagonal lines to visually create an arrow to these little people that are looking out in the lake. This one's Ben's picture. Just the incorporation of triangles in your frame. That's another idea of the golden triangle. So kind of a non-traditional pet portrait, which I kind of like. You've got these visual triangles, these groupings of threes visually that I think work really well. The third one is the golden ratio. So this one is based off of the Fibonacci sequence, and it's again derived from the rule of thirds, but it's tighter. You get closer to the edges with this one. And the closer these leading lines come to the edges, the faster they're going to move. So this is a slow visual area, picking up speed, picking up more speed, visually faster and faster and faster as we get down to that cone. And we see the golden ratio very often in staircases, like spiral staircases. Foliage is another good example of the golden spiral. Take a look at this frame. My main subject is the corn. And I know this, and I did this on purpose because I wanted to showcase the swans. This is Swan Park north of the metro. And this is what 20 below in January looks like in Minnesota. These are frost and icicles coming off of his face mask because it was 20 below and we had a bit of a wind that day. And I just love the determination of this gentleman that goes out and feeds the swans every morning. There's thousands and thousands of them that come in. But it's composed in such a way that the swans are a main subject matter. They're visually taking up a good chunk of the frame. They're bright, but they're not sharp, so we move past them. Up and over the gentleman. And he's an identifiable subject as well because he's a human, so I definitely want to check him out, figure out what he's doing, but he's not engaging the photographer. He's not looking at the lens. So his arms, and this is a really great frame around the red bucket. Again, red is a very dramatic color, coming forward as the feed, the corn being the main subject. It's like an environmental portrait, something a little non-traditional. Like the last one, the dreaded rule of quads or center weighted. And I pull this one forward because I've been guilty of this. I'm sure you've heard this from the past, get your subject out of the center. Use the rule of thirds. You have to use the rule of thirds. You don't have to. Again, it just depends on what the photograph is and how you can kind of simplify the visual information that's there. Center weighted, or the rule of quads, this one is all about balance. It's about symmetry. It's about negative space. It's about minimalism. So we are simplifying a really busy scene, just trying to balance it out. Here, very similar. We've got 4 quads that have almost the exact same information in them. In this scene, this is my niece last summer at the park. Very busy scene. We've got all these diagonal lines coming in from the corners. Putting her in the center was honestly the easiest because we were on a teeter-totter at this time, going up and down and up and down. And I used an ultra wide angle lens with a center weighted focus point and just kind of kept it down at my core and went continuous mode. Tried to shoot a couple of them, maybe 30, 40 photos to get a few that I liked, where she was smiling and not making a crazy face at me. But using the center weighted composition here works. It simplifies all these crazy background elements and just lets us focus on the expression, the emotion, the environment. Last one. It's the main subject here. Where does your eye go? This is what my coffee looks like every morning. Love to pour over like a good cup of coffee in the morning. The sun is very, very, very bright. I need to get some blinds or something to combat that. But anytime that the like the steam is rolling up, I tend to run and grab my camera really quick. Yeah, the sunburst. Good point, Veronica. Veronica says the pot, then the cup. And that kind of makes sense because the coffee pot is a bigger element. So I could see definitely how you're drawn to that. The little starburst was added on purpose to help pull the cup out as the main subject. But when we're really kind of looking at the scene, let's divide it up into those quadrants. Take a look at the symmetry that's happening. We've got the cup here, just kind of half and half, light on top, dark on the bottom. The upper quad, it's very similar, about half and half, light on top, dark on the bottom. Lower quad, a lot more dark with a little bit of light. Upper alternate quad, a lot of dark, a little bit of light. Just kind of did this on purpose, simplifying the scene. Again, it just worked out really conveniently that these things were lining up and mimicking themselves in such a way that creates a really harmonious scene. Okay. Glad that makes sense. I do see a lot of questions. Before I jump into actually putting these ideas into practice, let me kind of go through a couple of these and see what you all have been asking about. And then if you see any, go ahead and jump in and ask.
I did have some, like Jillian says, go ahead and put more questions if you got them in the chat section, but it did have a few, so you don't have to go all the way back here, Jillian.
Thank you.
Several people asked in different ways, but do you crop before you edit, or what's your crop in camera versus the crop afterward? Are there different times where you might crop in camera versus somebody made a comment about shooting wide and then cropping later depending on the matter?
Yeah, I also saw something relating to like I'm worried about pixel depth. All of these things kind of relate to the same idea. So when you think about cropping, take out all those ideas in your head about over cropping. You can successfully crop half of your image and still get a really high res photograph as long as your camera's within 3 to 5 years old. If you have at least 24 megapixels, I can crop out half of the photo. So I go from a horizontal to a vertical or a vertical to a horizontal, and I can still print an 11 by 14, a 16 by 20 out of that resolution and have more than enough. I personally don't crop out more than half of my photo at a time unless it really calls for it. It's like a backup to something else that I'm using, because then you do definitely, you run the risk of losing resolution at that point. And if it's just going on a social media site or like a website where it's low res is okay, then you can crop out 90% of the picture and just be left with a little 10% section of it, because the needs are smaller, of course.
Another question was on the, coming off of that topic, somebody asking about the sacrificing of pixels or how it affects pixels in your image if you crop, which I think is a good question. Something definitely to.
Yeah. It all comes back down to megapixels. So you're not actually like affecting or changing the pixels at all. That is done with editing, like exposure or blacks and whites and contrast and all that kind of normal editing stuff. But think about, so let me think back to resolution. So let's say we've got an 8 by 10 print. So an 8 by 10 print comes down to about a 1 megabyte file, and you need 4 megapixels to get an accurate and a high quality 8 by 10 print. This is back from my retail days. It's probably an old stat at this point, but if we kind of simplify it down to that ratio, let's say we have 20 megapixels now in our camera. I can crop down to 25% and still get an 8 by 10 out of it, because we're taking 20 megapixels and cutting it into a fourth of what it was. So now we're left with 4 megapixels, and that does make a difference for sure. If you have a camera with 50 megapixels, like I said, you can crop out half of your photo, and now we still have a 25 megapixel file, and we can print large 16 by 20, 20 by 30 prints out of it, no problem. I will definitely crop for the specific proportion that I'm doing. So if I have an image that I want to print 8 by 10, I'm going to crop it to 8 by 10. And then when I export it, save it as a JPEG or a TIFF. These are going to be native raw files. I'm going to probably go through a printing site like Looking Glass or a different camera store, and I will name it accordingly. So I'll go Bell 8 by 10 or 8x10, and then the file name. Then let's say I want to do a vertical one, Bell 8x10V, file name. Facebook is another thing that I'll do. So I'll actually label the photographs for the proportion that I have cropped it for.
Okay, I think that kind of answers one of the last questions that had just come in. How final aspect ratios affect cropping in both camera and post editing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll get into that more in the next section so I can show you what I'm talking about.
Okay.
The other major question I was noticing was like, do I crop in camera or do I wait to crop after the fact? And that kind of comes down to subject matter. So when I'm doing any kind of moving subject, wildlife, sporting events, nieces and nephews that are tiny running around, I'm going to use a center weighted focusing point. I'm going to use a center weighted metering system, and I'm going to compose it for them in the middle because that's going to be the fastest autofocus tracking, the best wiggle room for my birds or for my kids or whatever. And then I'll crop it for composition after the fact. But if I am composing a macro piece or an architectural piece, a still life, something like that, I'm going to kind of compose it in camera. So I'm going to sort of line everything up the way that I want it, knowing that I might need a little bit of wiggle room depending on what the end purpose is going to be.
There are a couple of questions here, but I don't know if you want to finish out the editing piece or if you want to take those now. There was one really good
go ahead.
thought on how to design photos for global audience concerning directionality. How might other things like color fit in? Pretty broad scale question, but just wondering if you had any thoughts on it. It's a good question, I think.
I will discuss that in the next section. I also see that Paul asks, in a landscape, where do you tend to place a strong foreground element? This gets into stylistically, like a good indicator that you have a physical style as a photographer is that all your photos sort of line up the same. They kind of look the same. Personally, many of my photographs, the main subject ends up in the lower left-hand corner. I don't know why. Like, this is one, the subject's in the same spot. This one, the subject's in the same spot. This one, the subject's in the same spot. I'm not pulling these out specifically because of that, but it's just a trend in my photography. For some reason, I always put my subject off to the left and then I balance it off with something to the right. It's interesting. Your style might be completely different. And, you know, talking about it on a global scale, it's pretentious to think that you kind of default to a Western or to an English-minded orientation. So reading left to right, because most countries understand English or speak English. But if you want to go into more of a specific region, Asia versus Europe versus, you know, India versus the United States, think about how they read and how they process visual information, and then, you know, cater your orientation, cater your subject matter to that specifically. That's what I would do.
Good answer.
Okay. The last section, and we got a good 15 minutes left, so I'll get to a couple of these. But I want to put this into practice. I want to show you the difference and why this is important and how to do this with your own work. When we diagram a photograph, we think about the elements of design, we think about composition and the output of which these photos are going to be. And then we use photo diagramming to identify the photograph's main subject and help highlight it. We identify any other focal points that may need addressing. I then identify any major lines, so leading lines, continuous, that sort of thing. Lastly, I'm going to identify any distractions and correct them if possible. If we do have any major issues, can we correct them with cropping? Can we just get rid of them? If we have a lot of zigzaggy lines and a lot of texture, find a major line and line it up with either edge of the frame. That's going to help kind of calm everything down. Does orientation fix things? This one's my favorite. It's kind of a mind melding moment. You know, if you have a photo that doesn't have a strong orientation, like you don't necessarily know which way is up visually, see if flipping it upside down helps. Reversing it if there's no text or identifiable subjects. 90 degrees, so go from horizontal to vertical. The orientation of which you take the photo doesn't necessarily have to be the orientation of which it is hung. And that's really hard for some people. So the last section, to put this into practice, I'm going to stop sharing and then switch over to my iPad. I want to stress that this is not an in-depth editing class. There's too many different editing options out there. There's too many different workflows out there that I can't address them all. And I don't want to get bogged down with those kind of questions, but I just want to show you these 4 steps and show you what I mean. I'm going to be using today just a tablet. This is my iPad with a stylus, so I can visually show you what I'm doing. Just the Photos app on my iPad, not Lightroom, not Photoshop, not Photo Picture Editor, just Photos. If you aren't tech savvy or you do not have a tablet or the means to do this, print them out. The other thing I like to do is like get an old frame with glass or acrylic on them and a dry erase marker. This is the old school way to do it. So you've got your picture. This is me, a self-portrait that someone took for me. And you can do these same ideas with a dry erase marker. You can draw on them. You can identify any leading lines. And this works, definitely. I've even had people print out their photos on like just normal office paper, like an inkjet printer. And then they physically draw over them with a Sharpie or a pen or a pencil or something like that. So they can hash out this visually. And it helps, it really does. So find the method that works for you and please put this stuff into practice. Share screen. And just in case I can't see it, then please confirm that you can see my iPad. Yep, there it is.
Yep, confirmed.
Good, good, good. So for the last 10 minutes or so, I'm going to go through a couple photos. Hopefully I can get to 4 or 5 of them and just kind of, again, show you these ideas, go through them in practice. My favorite photos that my new favorite photo that was like a safety picture. Let's see if it's in here. Wow. Just to go through mine first, is this one. I had a pileated woodpecker right outside of my house on a morning walk, and it was backlit and it was not exposed properly. This was like program mode, run out the door. Hopefully I got it. And then it flew away right after. We call this the safety shot in wildlife photography. And there's not a whole lot you can do. And I mean, our main subject here is just the bird, of course. We've got some good leading lines here, here. We've got a lot of negative space to play with and maybe some distractions. Do I want the trees there? Do I not? All of these things that I can address. Now, this one I did edit first because it was the only one I got. And I really have never seen these pileated woodpeckers about the size of owls. They are huge. Edited it so that the sun was, or the sky was white. The bird was properly exposed. And I ended up doing this with it. Kind of blows your mind a little bit. Took a safety shot that I was going to throw away, identified what I liked about it, and I orientated it in this position because it's going to go over a staircase, so I needed it a long and skinny vertical. And to orientate it for the woodpecker's perspective, it kind of looked like he was peering up over an edge. So I definitely moved it to relate that. Orientation doesn't matter. Okay. Let's start with this one. Great sunset, love the light. Definitely got a good play between the driftwood and the silhouette of the people. Horizon line's kind of in the same place. So we have to kind of decide, what is our subject? What is our main subject? And all I'm doing again is I'm on here, just go to photos. And I've got this function called markup, which all iPhones have. I'm pretty sure Androids have it too, which allows me to draw in my pictures. Subject matter, let's go through this. Photograph, same subject. I'm like torn between the people and the driftwood. There's definitely some visual pull in both of those areas. So those are kind of be my two main focal points. Major lines, this up here. Horizon line is definitely one. This is one. This is one. There really isn't any like perspectual lines leading you into the frame. Any distractions? Not really. It's a little crooked, so I might straighten it out a little bit, but that's pretty standard with landscapes. And I noticed that most of the visual information is happening here and here. So there's not as much visual information happening up in this area. So that might be something to crop out. You know, it is a dramatic sunset, but maybe we don't need as much of it. Maybe it's pulling our eyes visually away from the things that are happening within this scene. So I'm just going to kind of do a freestyle crop, but when we think about, again, those different proportions, we can see very easily we've got 16:9. So that's already kind of a great scene. 8:10. Now we've got really good right and left balance visually. So I like this orientation. The horizon line is right in the middle, which is fine because the sand and the sky, they're equally important in this frame. 4:6, that sort of thing. This I like as well, putting the silhouettes right on that third line. Helps them have more dominance, and we don't need the driftwood right on that third line on the other side because it's bigger, so it's kind of pulling you up and over into the background. I might also, what happens if we go vertically? Something like this. Again, there isn't a right or wrong answer with any of these, but I just want to show you the different options based on where these pictures are going to go after the fact. I kind of like this as well. Step up over that log into the sunset. We can really crop in. Now it's maybe a little bit more distance. It's got a little bit more drama to it. Or maybe we come up. I think I kind of want to come up so we can see that color, see that sunset. Oh, Kate, that's a great point. She says, perhaps an issue of the audience again, not positive, but a person who likes birds would know the bird had been turned and the woodpeckers can't stand on a tree like that. That is very possible. And this is where I reiterate that I am an artist, not an ornithologist. It's kind of like with astrophotography. I don't know specifically what color the sky is supposed to be, but I know what color I want it to be. And so I'm very honest about these facts about, yes, this might not be visually accurate, but it makes a pretty cool photo. And I'm okay with that. Let's go to this one. There was a couple different insect photos that were submitted, and I like this one as an example, because again, it's very center weighted. This is how a butterfly photograph for me would start. Subject matter, got some really cool leading lines here, just kind of like framing, some good triangles here. This might be distracting. This might be distracting, I'm not sure. But basically we're going to try to get my subject off of the center. While I'm kind of playing with this, Jen or Ben, do you have any closing words? I know we're running close to that hour mark. So if there's anything you guys want to say while I'm playing with this orientation, please feel free.
I just want to say really quickly, first of all, you're awesome, Jillian, and our community. Thank you so much for sending in all of these images. I love getting to see people's work. But anytime we're learning something like rules of composition, just hold on to the fact that this is, they're general guidelines that lean towards what it is we as humans are drawn to. And so these are kind of like, they're brain teasers. And what I do when I'm composing or cropping is really, I just play around, and I do what Jillian's doing to some degree, and I'll save multiple versions in different crops. And what I find is that there's one version of it that I'm always drawn back to, where I find my mind kind of settles. And so you know, it's an artistic interpretation. So don't like take these as ideas, put them into action, and then just really see where your mind kind of settles, where it is, because you're doing this for you. Don't make pictures for anybody else. I mean, of course, if you're being paid, make pictures for somebody else. But if you're doing this for the pure joy of photography, then find those spots where you just really feel like that's it. It's right. And let it sit.
Yeah, sometimes I'll go back, I'll let it sit a day and then come back afterwards, and different ones will speak to me.
Yeah.
It's this idea that you get so emotionally attached to your pictures that diagramming them will help kind of disengage you from the personal connection you have with your photos. The butterfly one, I wanted to just talk about the fact that I did flip it so that the butterfly was not, I flipped it so it was turned 90 degrees. And personally, I think visually that worked a little bit better, because now he's got a direction of which he's going instead of top to bottom. He's like, you could put him off to the lower right-hand side and he's got a place to go.
And then there was a question too in the chat from Jill, Jillian, that was she just wanted to know how to see more of Jillian's classes, and so I shared a link there to the Tamron website, where a lot of the pre-recorded content is for previous like classes and webinars and things that you know, that Jillian and a lot of the other tech reps and a lot of the Tamron ambassadors have all done. So absolutely check that out. It's incredibly inspiring, and there's a ton of content there, which another plus to it is that they're all relatively, I guess, shorter, well-timed, so that you can fit them in like a lunch period or in the morning while you're having your coffee or anything like that.
Yeah.
But there's a ton more content there on the link in the chat.
With the wedding photo, I'm just kind of cutting out that bottom left-hand corner, really getting into the moment that's happening. This one, I like to play left and right. And again, I'm quickly going through those 4 ideas in my mind. Just wanted to show you some options with a couple of more. This one I might come in a little bit more. So we're really pulling out that flower as the main subject. And I love the road, but maybe if you change your perspective a little bit, you can spread them out visually, where the road would be further to the left and then the flower would be further to the right, so they're not so close. But that I like, just in a little bit more. We could do vertically. We want to really highlight just one of the blooms, but that looks funny. You don't want the road in there at all. One more and then I'll let you all go. This one screams panoramic to me. The people in the middle kind of get distracting, so I need to try to figure out how to make it about the girl and the saxophonist. Maybe I really make this long and skinny. It's, it doesn't take much. But I didn't honestly see that the musician there until I started kind of playing around with it. Also with the musician, he's getting into a little bit of the shade. So this is something that you should do in Lightroom or Photoshop or your editing program. Go in with a brush and lighten him up. So like, I'm just gonna increase the exposure just slightly right in here. So he'll visually pop forward because he'll be brighter than the background. I might even go in and darken this little section so that it's less apparent and it's just becoming about a spotlight on these two people. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this class today. Again, if you have any questions after the fact or after we're done, because we are wrapping up, please feel free to reach out on social media. I go by Belle Tamron USA, again, on Facebook and Instagram. You can also reach out specifically to Looking Glass or Ben on Instagram and Facebook as well. I mean, the takeaway here is please stay engaged, please stay connected. This is what we're here for.
Awesome. Great class, Jillian. Lots and lots of compliments. And of course, thank you again to our wonderful community. You guys are incredible. Your participation today was fantastic. Ben, always great to see you. Tamron, huge thanks. All right, everybody.
Well, thank you for having us and partnering with us on this. It's been, just as good to get out and if not see everybody, to just see the participation and just stay active in the photo community. So
absolutely. All right, guys, have a beautiful day.
We'll see you next time.
See everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you so much.
Thank you.